Hello, and thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to do this. Today I'm going to talk about the digital transformation and how it interacts with the ongoing transformation of Japanese business. I'm particularly interested in what the leading Japanese companies are doing and what we can see as markers for the future as to where Japan is headed. So today what I want to do is talk about how the DX, the digital transformation, is going to change the ways in which Japanese companies will have to think about business strategy and business models. So let me begin with what is the DX? So the DX is, of course, this moment in time that we're in right now, where great advances in communication and computing powers paired with analytical techniques have opened up a whole new slew of possibilities and business opportunities. For me, it helps to separate these technical developments and disruptions in two categories. One is the hardware side of things, where we have a whole new vision and sensing technologies. We, of course, have new communication standards with 5G and speeds in particular. We have the rise of autonomous systems and robotics. On the manufacturing side, Industry 4.0 is emerging as a new engine for digital manufacturing. And of course, the cloud, which is basically a whole new set of possibilities in mainframe computing and speeds associated with that. On the software side, we're talking about, of course, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then new techniques, what to do with these data. I think currently it's fair to say that on the hardware side, especially in digital manufacturing, Japanese and German companies are very strong. It is said that on the software side, United States companies are very strong. These are the GAFAM players. The DX is important because it's inescapable. The DX is borderless, it is ubiquitous, it's everywhere, and it's going to be fast. So there is no choice. No company, no government, no country can say, no, the DX is now and here, and that is why it is important and will importantly shape how companies think about their futures. Okay, so the disruption that the DX is bringing that I want to focus on today is in these two areas that will be the focus of my discussion. Let me just give you a few examples here. This is usually abbreviated as AAS, like so MAAS, mobility as a service, transportation as a service, or logistics. And so the technical definition of this is when for a single company, the core profit generation shifts from the sales of goods to offering services that allow people to benefit from using the goods. And the second aspect that I will also mention today is the rise of digital manufacturing, which is bringing all kinds of disruptions, including making economies of scale a thing of the past, because we can now have single piece manufacturing. The rise of a digital twin, which allows a new way of thinking about safety, inspections, repairs, and so forth. And of course, the complete changes in the nature of work and the requisite employment skills. The next definition is, what do I mean with business strategy? And I think I don't have to dwell on this a long time because there's quite some clarity. What business are we in? Market dynamics, competitor intelligence, identify the competition, and then also how do we compete? Are we better? Are we cheaper? What's our core competence? How are we going to create sustainable competitive advantage? In short, the strategy is a plan to win. And so, for instance, choose and focus at Sentaku to Chuchu is an example of this. Which business do we want to be in, and how are we going to outcompete others? I think Japanese companies are very good at this now, and also getting very good advice. The business model, people use it in different ways. What I would like you to think about when I say business model is the 5 core constituencies of the logic of how the company will earn a profit. So first, it starts with market segmentation. Who exactly are our customers? Second, the value proposition. Which of their problems do we solve? So why should they want our services or our products? Then a sales plan. How do we want to reach them? the pricing model, how will we charge for the use of our services or the purchase of the good, and the logic of how this will actually make money at the end of the day. So the business model, in my use of the word, is really the company's design on how to earn profit. We can't be all things to all people, so we have to focus in on a certain group of customers. We need to make sure that they understand that they really need our product. We need to reach them. We need to be very clever and innovative in these changing times of how we want to charge for the service. And then we'll need to lay out, especially for investors, how this will generate profits. But is now with the DX becoming more relevant. And I think that maybe I want to posit today that the growing relevance of the business model may be one of the biggest disruptions for Japanese companies. Okay, so why is this important now? As I just said, there's this big ongoing change in the industrial architecture of Japan. Then, of course, there's a change in corporate governance and global financial markets that everybody's quite aware of in Japan. The old Japan way of just focusing on size and sales rather than profit no longer works, right? So show me the money is becoming more important. And the point here is that the DX, the arrival of the digital transformation, is affecting both of these at the same time, right? Both the business strategy and the business models. How companies were positioned to compete with the new technologies is going to be a question of disruptive technologies. And if companies don't, then they'll fail. So this is my final definition for the day, actually. What is servitization? What I mean with this, it's the moment in time when a company realizes that it's making actually more from services than from selling goods. And that requires a whole new set of core competencies and skills. It's all about recurring profit and how many customers sign on. Quarterly profit's going to be much lower, but the future income from subscriptions and things like that will become more important. Right? And then, of course, we need new skills and job descriptions for workers because we're no longer producing and manufacturing anything. We're offering a service. Right? So servitization is really at the heart of some of the fundamental changes that are going to happen very soon. Let me explain this with the example of an industry that we all know very well, the music industry. This industry has undergone 4 important disruptions. As I think we might remember, in the late 80s, Sony and Denon developed the CD-ROM, which was the huge step from analog to digital music. That was like a big technology disruption. Then came the German Fraunhofer Institute that developed the MP3 format, which allowed the sharing of these digital music items. Napster, a college student, then it took him no time to start peer-to-peer file sharing, which the music industry initially tried to stop through lawsuits, but you cannot stop technology through lawsuits is what we learned from that. Then came iTunes and Apple, and they said, oh, by the way, you're going to listen not on a turntable, but through the iPod. There was another huge disruption. And then finally came Spotify and said, you know what? You don't need any of this stuff. Just don't buy music like that. You can stream by paying us a subscription. Or if you don't want to pay us a subscription, you can also listen to advertisements while you listen to music. Either way, we're going to make money. Right? And so that is the servitization of the music industry. So what I'm here to discuss next is, isn't this going to happen across industry after industry after industry? So let's take a crystal ball and look at what this might look like in other industries. So I want to start with a little quiz. Here's the thing I want you to think about. Is the following statement true or false? By 2030, 75% of people will no longer own a car. And let me tell you, when I ask this question in class, 85% of students says this is false. 15% of students might say, well, maybe, but not by 2030. Right? It'll take much longer. Okay, and that's fair enough. But the thing is, if you're a car company, you can't say, well, maybe it'll take a little longer, because it may actually happen, right? Let me talk a little bit about Toyota. Toyota is out there. among all car companies in the world by betting on becoming a mobility as a service company. So in 2030, I posit to you, when you need to go someplace, you will actually have probably a subscription service, or, you're willing to listen to advertisements. So you need to go someplace, you launch the app, and there's at least 3 transportation options. One is a car that's already parked in your area. Second, a car sharing device will pick you up like Uber or Lyft today, except there's no driver. The third is a flying car will arrive within 10 minutes and drop you off where you need to go, right? So what will you be paying for this? Well, if you pay a monthly subscription, there might be, it's like cell phones today. The car is completely commoditized in this vision. And so here, this is interesting. Toyota actually has this vision. This is from Toyota's annual report 2019. So it's already 3 years old, but it's actually one of the more interesting visual representations of what Toyota has in mind. They're thinking of having a platform that has a ton of services, including ride sharing, car sharing, rental cars, taxi services, logistics, and so forth. And all of this is on some platform, which, of course, as you guessed, is collecting a ton of data about the users, the where the car is going, how long the car is taking, safety issues, whatever. Okay, so what does this mean for a car company? So let's think a little bit about how this changes what a car company actually does. So on the strategy side, what business are we in? How do we compete? Well, in the future, the differentiation will not be through the car, because the car is the same. It's a utilitarian thing. The competition will be about driving traffic, both literally and figuratively, pulling traffic onto the platform. What is the new business model? How will a car company make money in this new world of subscription? Well, the unit economics are no longer about selling a car for $50,000. It's about the number of subscribers and recurring, profit, the revenue per rider. So what else can we sell them? And then there's probably some version of the 2080 rule, which is the same as in telephones right now, right? That 20% of users will account for 80% of profit. So how do we cater to those 20% of users, and who's that going to be? And then basically car companies will make money through innovative pricing models. Is there going to be a freemium, fee per use? They'll probably have some sort of frequent flyer program because they don't want us to switch between all these different offers. I'll tie this into other services. And then eventually they will make money by targeting the right group first. Should they go after the young first, right? The rich, the underserved, where there's no public transport, in the countryside, and how should they reach them? All of these questions are up for grabs, right? And that's a very interesting moment in time. It's very exciting for strategy making and business model making, but we don't know the answers. All of this is as out there as the future of business. For all companies, that means that they have to think about doing things differently. And what is the car worker of the future in this world, right? No longer somebody who makes a car. It's somebody who provides a service. And so car worker in the future is a highly educated person who knows something about IT, or somebody who knows something about omotenashi, right? Providing the best service and that sort of thing, right? So MAAS. As I already said, the vehicles are fairly standardized, which means they can be 100% be built by robots, right? The Toyota production system of the future is not a just-in-time assembly with, supply chains and whatnot. That's all automated. The new Toyota production system will be about the just-in-time delivery of people. And key is the quality of the fleet is key. And so the R&D will go into making a good fleet, collecting a bunch of data, and optimizing the services, right? And already said, the car worker of the future is a different person, and the business model will change. This is the Woven City, a former a Toyota plant at the foot of Fujisan, where it's not that big. It's like maybe 2 square kilometers or something like that. But Toyota has built a completely smart city where everything is basically automated and it's carbon net zero and it has all of these, fantastic qualities to it. What I'm interested in here is how this is positioned, right? So Toyota is saying our vision is to expand mobility beyond what mobility currently means. In fact, what they're saying is we want to increase what mobility can do for people beyond cars and transportation. Right? And that's interesting, right? So that's inspired. Now we can start thinking about, okay, what will that, how is it going to look like? The important point for me is that this company has embraced the DX and said, well, we have to think differently about how we want to think about the future. There are other companies in Japan that are doing something very similar. You can say the exact same thing about trains that I just said about cars, right? So here's Hitachi in 2010. At the time, Hitachi operated in more than 40 countries, 360,000 people, $100 billion. It's a little smaller now, which I think is a good thing. But there were like 12 core businesses. Hitachi in 2010, by the way, was not doing very well. And what's really interesting is how this company has changed over the last 10, 12 years. If we look at the new Hitachi, here's the vision. The vision is Hitachi is going to be a smart city company. And the vision of what the smart city solutions will do is it will help keep people safe, have operations move efficiently, and see business thriving. It's a grid. A smart city is a thing that is not defined by streets and street lights and that sort of thing. It's about a connected space, right? And for Hitachi, this also means it's no longer about making things, but about connecting things. Let me talk about Siemens for a little bit, which is Hitachi's biggest competitor in Germany. So the old business model of Siemens was to sell these high-speed trains to the German Bahn, just like Hitachi and Kawasaki sell trains, Shinkansen, to JR, right? And Siemens has already decided that they're no longer going to do this, even though they're making a ton of money out of making trains and selling spare parts to the railway provider. No. Oh, and by the way, of course, also IT operations and repairs and the back end of making the trains run. The future option that Siemens is aspiring is to sell not the train, but the entire transportation service to the city, or maybe JR, which is running the train stations, right? So it's the same as the auto company and the music industry. Get away from a pipe where somebody makes a train, sells a train, and then there's some train operator that charges something to users. This is all about connectivity, right? Similar and by the way, if Siemens is doing this, I would bet money, even though I don't know this for a fact, that the Hitachi people are looking at this very carefully. And then the second is the automotive services. Rather than selling semiconductors as car parts to some car maker, provide connectivity for the future cars. And so lo and behold, if you look at what this company has done recently, there's a whole new choose and focus going on at Hitachi, which is a very interesting pivot to leave chemicals, medical, construction machinery, metals, and a large number of these other previous businesses behind, acquires and so reinforce abilities in the power grid and automation and solutions and high tech, and move away from a pipe model where they make things and sell things to providing connectivity services, which is why Ventara and the Lumada platform are very important for this company. This is just a whole new world of how we think about how companies operate, what the value proposition is, who they sell to, and how they charge for it. Okay, so what will it take to be successful in this moment in time? And the answer is we don't know. That is the kicker, right? The kicker is this is filled with uncertainties. What kind of skills and people do we need? I mentioned the auto worker of the future, but we don't, maybe we don't even know yet. What kind of processes in-house? What kind of corporate processes will it take? What will people get promoted for? Where will the innovation come from? And what kind of governance system will guide what CEOs decide, right? So there's a whole new structure around how profit is generated, why it is important, how it is important, and so forth and so on. So my answer to this question, what it will take, is some sort of vision for the future and aggressive bets. Toyota may be special, Hitachi may be special. Can Japan overall compete? Right, so what will it take for Japanese companies to make this shift? And I think there are two big opportunities for Japan. The first is what I'd like to call lucky moments. And what we mean by that is that Japan is in a particularly fortunate position right now. It was dealt a good hand. Because two things that are usually thought of as a crisis moment are happening at Japan at the same time to create this moment of opportunity. And the two trends are demographic change. I've graphed here Japan's working population. We are here. We know, I mean, unless something really miraculous changes, which is unlikely, the Japanese population the working population will fall below 50 million people in the next 20 years, right? And this is going to be rapid because of the aging society and demographic change. At the same time, the DX is happening. It's the average age of small firm CEOs in Japan over time. So this orange line here was the age distribution in 1995, when the average small firm CEO in Japan was, well, younger than 50. But these guys are still running their firms. So fast forward to 2015, the average age of small firm CEO in Japan is over 70. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It is what it is, right? But the point here is that that makes the DX much less of a threat, right? So this is Japan's big chance, number one. Japan's big chance, number two, is a completely different ballpark. It is Industry 4.0. And I promised at the beginning to talk a little bit about digital manufacturing. What is digital manufacturing? Well, it's this shift. It's this disruption of what engineers call the production pyramid. The production pyramid is basically what governs factory shop floors, in Japanese, the gemba, today. Right. So today, if you go to a car plant, if you go and visit a Toyota car plant, you'll see something like this. There's some sort of a flow of goods, right? So stamping and pressing, bodies, and there's painting, and the platform comes, the chassis comes over here, and then there are a bunch of people that put the thing together. All of these processes are run by this pyramid. So there's a shop floor software that is run by an advanced software that is run by a planning software that is run by ERP. The vision of digital manufacturing is that all of this will be meshed into one. That when we have 5G technologies on the shop floor and all parts can talk to each other at the same time, we no longer need this pyramid. Everything will be known at all times. The products and the machines and the parts can talk to each other. They can do this by themselves. So that's the vision. The vision is very clear. It doesn't exist quite yet, but it's happening. And so what's interesting then is where's the money made in this digital manufacturing? We have these various robots and sensors. They already exist, right? And we have various softwares. And the next step will be the disruption that's happening now is to bring an integrated system into this by having these new platforms that support planning, logistics, process optimization, that allow single piece manufacturing rather than economies of scale and all kinds of other advanced solutions. Then there's a third level that's far into the future, which is when the digital twin is in the cloud, and then there's big data can govern the production and the cloud system and so forth and so on. So what we know is that the upper level doesn't have any use cases yet, but the jockeying for position is happening in this next step, going from Gemba to these integrated production systems. And so here is a number of examples of companies that are competing in this space. And the point of this chart is simply to say that this digital manufacturing is a play between Germany and Japan. That the big players here, like Siemens and Bosch and SAP and Dürr, are joined by Hitachi and Fanuc and Keyence and Denso and DMG Mori and so on and so on. And so the final thing that I want to leave you with is some thoughts on for the skeptics. Right? The big question is, can Japan grab this moment? It's clear that something has to happen. I mean, if old Japan were to continue, then or those that continue in the old Japan view, to put it differently, will probably not grab this moment. Right? So a mindset change is clearly necessary. Without a big vision, under the tyranny of the current sort of midterm 3-year plans and, just continuing and incremental, there will be no big vision. And without a big vision, companies will have a hard time surviving this shock. There has to be new strategic thinking, which I think it's a point I made in this presentation, and a break of old processes. Overcoming the digital cliff is already a topic in Japan, but there's a digital show now, and what makes me positive is that Japan's best companies have begun this transition, and they are placing aggressive bets. They may become pathfinders for others, and yes, Japan is always a little bit more slow and a little bit more deliberate in making these changes. That could be good, it could be bad, but it's steady. And slow doesn't mean stagnant. Slow just means that companies are on their way. So thank you for listening, and I will stop here. So let's start a discussion. Thank you for listening. And I see already a first hand. Rashid, why don't you get us started?
And I would like to ask the aspect of the slow aspect of Japanese company, which you mentioned in I think the last part of the presentation. I can't see how the slowness can take advantage of this uncertain world, because since in an uncertain world, probably, in my opinion, I think the most important thing is to be able to change the direction based on the situation. But since in Japan, I assume that since there are many difficulties to change direction very quickly, so I want to hear how the slowness can actually be an advantage, especially under the situation.
Yeah. So first of all, I completely understand. So as somebody who works in a Japanese organization, every day you see that sometimes it takes too long. I wouldn't overrate the speed of companies in other places. So, but yeah. So in comparison, there's something to this slow thing. It is not always bad. So what's important is, I think, for Japanese companies to realize where they can be slow and careful and thorough and do the due diligence and that sort of thing, and where they just can't, where they can't afford to be slow. And that is probably one of the biggest changes that has to happen. If you're slow, you're dead. Okay. So it's going to be a little bit more, there's going to be more pressure. And I think that could actually be helpful for some Japanese companies, but we'll have to see. I don't know. It's the thing that everybody in Japan knows, right? So it's just a question of how to change this. Now, one thing that people say, one more footnote to this, Yoshi, what people say is that bringing about corporate change in Japan is a very slow process, because it has to be done, in a methodical way, and everybody has to be on board. So people say that changing a Japanese company is like changing a cargo ship, that it takes forever to change it. But once it's changed and has a new direction, it can go full speed. And so that is actually a possible explanation of what we see here. It took Hitachi 10 years to figure out what they're going to be.
I really like the point that you made about how this could potentially be a lucky moment for Japan, where there's an intersection between this demographic change that they are facing and also the DX. So where where one trend could potentially solve the issues presented by the other. So you also mentioned that best companies, so companies like Toyota, Hitachi, has already begun the transition to a new business model and could become the pathfinder for other companies and being the trailblazers of change. So I guess one of the reasons why these companies are able to do so could be because they have operations outside of Japan, so which enabled them to pick up some unique ideas from the other countries they're operating in and potentially bring this back to Japan. So I was just wondering, how about other more quote-unquote more normal Japanese companies, especially those with a strong domestic focus? How can they start rethinking their business models and have a clearer vision for the company's future?
Yeah. I don't know. There are companies like IGPI that are advising, these companies to be more global. So there's much more good advice to be had, right? So Japan itself is becoming more global in terms of business, not only in terms of corporate governance and investors demanding change, but also consulting firms and people who've studied abroad coming back and so forth. There's, of course, also the whole activity around open innovation and going to Silicon Valley, which, many companies have embraced. The true domestic companies that are stuck in the old Japan rut, I think we may have to get used to the fact that they may go away. And, that's sad. And, with the tatami maker that I showed in my picture for sentimental reasons. So I don't think we can have any expectation that all Japanese companies will survive this. It's just not possible. And nor would it be healthy for the economy. Some people will make mistakes. Some of the global companies may take the wrong bets. But the most important thing, I think, is that companies take these aggressive bets and prepare for the future. What I'm most worried about is companies that are just pretending that this is not happening, or it will not come to Japan, or it will take another 20 years or something like that. Those are the people that, as we learned from Clay Christensen, with this chart about the disruptions, you may not see it right now. You may think that 2030 is too soon or that sort of thing, but you have to prepare for it. And so, I don't think we can expect that all Japanese companies will survive.
So I think that it is quite difficult for large companies in Japan to fundamentally change their business model quickly due to the kind of the innovation dilemma as well. So would it be, more important for startups and the venture companies to lead such servitization and collaborate with large companies?
So why do Japanese companies have such a hard time changing? Well, part of it is lifetime employment, right? Because they can't just, let people go, nor do they want to, right? So people have to be retrained, not fired and rehired. Although that's changing at the margin. Can we incentivize large companies to think more strategically about this? And one thing is that the DX itself is such a pressure place. And the startup companies are becoming a source of new ideas. In Silicon Valley, give or take, 80% of startup companies exit through a merger and acquisition. That is, they sell their stuff to a large company. So they sell to Amazon or Cisco or Microsoft or something. And Microsoft's not in Silicon Valley, but you know what I mean, the West Coast. And so 80% are mergers and acquisitions, and 20% are going to the stock market with an IPO. In Japan, the opposite is true. 80% of Japanese startup companies go to the stock exchange. Why are so many Japanese startups going for the IPO route? And the answer is because there are so few large Japanese companies that are willing to buy out startups, right? So this M&A market for new ideas in Japan is still limited. So then what would it take to make large companies think about acquiring a startup for ideation. The old story was that the R&D labs had these leaders that thought that not invented here can't be good, and the startups are not very good and so forth. But I think that's changing as people are realizing that Japanese startups are getting better. That is actually, a way to success. The question is, can large Japanese companies learn how to take these ideas and turn them into new businesses? And I think the scaling is a big challenge. I'll add though that that's a challenge for any company in any country. But because Japanese processes are a little bit more rigid, it's actually possible that Japanese companies have a little bit more of a difficult time to engage in new business development. So yeah, engaging with the market for ideas is probably a really good idea.
I was really interested in the point you were making about how DX is transforming not just the product development phase, but all aspects of Japanese business. In particular, I was really interested in how DX is leading to new skills for workers, new types of workers, and how this may then lead to transformations in the organizational structure of businesses. And so I was wondering if you have any predictions for whether and how this kind of rigid Japanese business organization might change in the future.
Yeah, so there are two questions here, right? So one is sort of reskilling, and the other is, organizational change around employment structures. So on the reskilling side, this is a global issue. So everybody will have to reskill. This is actually an aspect where Japan's traditional employment system may come in helpful, because Japanese employees have always been retrained because of lifetime employment. The lifetime employment is actually good for certain things. Worker motivation, worker dedication. You don't have to, you can reskill at a very high level. You don't have to, you don't have turnover. You don't have to constantly reintroduce and onboard people. There's a, sharing of knowledge. We know from the United States, where the labor market is very liquid, that older employees will not share what they know with younger employees because of a fear of replacement. So throwing lifetime employment away would be foolish. And I think everybody in Japan agrees with that. Okay, so then how can we, within the confines of lifetime employment, how can we, rev up, sort of accelerate reskilling? And that's happening now. And there are some new changes in the labor law that allows people to go on an innovation sabbatical or have dual jobs and kind of go to a startup for a couple of years. And the labor shortage is actually a lucky moment. Because of the labor shortage, the large companies are saying, we cannot lay off people. If we lay off people, we don't have people. It's not as if we lay off people and we hire somebody else. Right? Because there's a labor shortage. So we have to find another way. And I'm watching this with great interest, because I think Japanese companies might actually be very innovative about how to reskill at a time of scarce labor. And so we'll learn a lot. We'll learn a lot in the process.
So one of the thoughts that came to my mind is that Japanese, especially the conglomerates and trading houses, they are very vertically organized. Like the healthcare division doesn't necessarily interact with the energy division. But if we go with the future of DX, a lot of the capabilities that they will require will be across industries. For example, capabilities of AI, machine learning. So do you think there is a fundamental shift required in how the organization is designed?
Yeah, so the silos. It's very interesting. I remember in the previous century, so in the late 20th century, we used to teach a lot of cases about Japanese companies that were so great at overcoming silos by having sort of a gold badge team that would cut across. So there are ways to overcome silos without doing a whole reorganization. which are HR practices. And so in this case that I used to teach, the company had a special shacho shitsu, so CEO level, report directly to CEO R&D team, that pulled a researcher out of every single business unit and stuck him in a room for 12 months and said, come up with something new, right? It's simple. It doesn't even cost anything. Why do we not do this all the time, right? You could take a salesperson out of every single business unit and do the same thing. I think it'd be a great thing to revive. They were called gold badge projects, and these guys, they were gold badge, and they were reporting to the CEO what they came up with. So why do we have these silos if it's so easy? Because maybe there are some encrusted structures or some company policies that actually pitches business units against each other by comparing the profit rates or something. So all of those are just simply bad management. So you could change that. Now, the whole thing about, do we need to completely redraw the organizational design? I'm not sure. I mean, I think that I couldn't give you a boilerplate answer to this. I think that would depend on the company. The consulting insight that I once was taught is, if you there are two things that you can do if you want to figure out whether a company is in trouble. Number one, you ask, who are your biggest competitors? And if you ask 10 people and you get 10 different answers, the company is in trouble because they're not sufficiently focused, right? The second consulting question is, sort of how do you get ahead, or how do you, what's your draw me an org design? And if people can't do it, or while they're doing it, they complain about their bosses, the org design is bad. You look at the org design, and if you don't understand what the power relations are, it's a bad design.
For sure, yeah.
You should always be able to draw this very clearly. And so maybe that would also be a good housekeeping exercise, to ask that question and see whether you can draw it, and then build in these things that cut across the functions or the business units, and say but people have tried to overcome this for years, right? So I don't think we have an answer to what a better org design is, other than keeping it in the business units and cut across in some important ways.
Right. And probably have a glue of long-term incentives as well. Yeah. Because these are long-term bets. So that might probably put it together.
That's a very important point, right? So how do you assess somebody who does a deep technology breakthrough project? Right? You can't just say, what did you do last year? What have you done for me? Yeah, because it takes 10 years, right? And so that is actually the next big thing I think that we'll see, is the professionalization of the HR function. That not that they're unprofessional, but there's HR isn't taught at the business school in Japan. It's not a job category. But there are specialists in HR, and I think that would be one of the things that Japanese companies will need going forward. Is some very highly trained, specially trained HR managers that understand the need to redefine success and set new incentives and motivations in a world where outcome is uncertain.
Do you think Japan should change the way to choose the next CEO? Like, as you mentioned, usually, in my perspective, I think usually Japanese CEOs choose next CEO, whether he or she shares the same idea or friends or good friends for years or so. And I think, in my opinion, that type of selection makes it difficult for the next CEO to probably change the company drastically, because he or she feels sorry about changing the culture of the company which the former CEO made, and so on and so forth. So do you think that there must be a big change in Japanese company to choose the way, or this is okay as Japan?
So you can make a very strong argument on either side of that question, that the Japanese system has been quite successful because the majority of Japanese CEOs are internal people, right? So they started working for the company at age 22, and they make it through the ranks. And that is a lot of time to observe somebody's qualities. So the CEO is a known quantity. They have dedicated their entire life to the company already. They are motivated the right way. You can make a very strong argument how the Japanese system is superior to other places. So in the United States, where the market for CEOs is quite liquid, right? And so, but bad result, let's get a new CEO. But you get these CEOs like they don't know anything about the business. They don't understand the company. Sometimes that's a good thing. They can come in and clean house and bring in some fresh air, but sometimes they just, don't know what they're doing. So you could argue that the Japanese way is, has its great advantages. The disadvantage is if a poor CEO picks another poor CEO who picks another poor CEO, and then you get this sort of what you're just describing. And I think there is some change in the air due to the corporate governance reforms. So at least for the very large global companies, they all now have these external board members. They have nomination committees. They have, the new CEO, of course, has to be signed off. It's I wouldn't know where to come down. I think that's company specific, and you could argue there's a certain Darwinism in there. I mean, if a company does this over and over and over again, they'll eventually just go away.
So allow me to ask a question about the fundamental change in business model, where there's a shift from selling individual products or one-off services to focus on annual recurring income. Yeah, so just wondering what current Japanese current Japanese companies who offer X as a service, what could they do to differentiate themselves and maintain their competitive edge against emerging players, both within Japan and from outside Japan, which could tend to offer similar services? Is there anything they can do leveraging on their position as a Japanese company to differentiate themselves from these competitors?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a new area, but I immediately, I'm thinking, okay, so what is an example? The first company that comes to mind is Fanuc.
Mm-hmm.
Fanuc, of course, makes robots. We understand that. But they're fundamentally a software company. I mean, they make these robots, but what makes Fanuc is what drives the robots, right? The numerical controls and the software behind it. And the story that impressed me was that after the great northern Japan earthquake, Tohoku rattled, right? And there were lots of plants in Tohoku, actually, semiconductor plants and, the car suppliers and so forth. And the challenge for them was not the earthquake was definitely a challenge, but the aftershocks. And you may recall that the aftershocks went on for like weeks, right? So if you have a plant where you have some robots and there's an aftershock, then each time you have an earthquake, and the aftershocks were real earthquakes, right? Somebody has to come and recalibrate the robot, right? So that used to be one of Fanuc's most profitable business. Some guy would drive up in a car, some person, and fix the robot and calibrate it and drive back, and that was a very profitable source of income for Fanuc. And during this disaster, that was not possible. There were no streets open. People could not drive in. So what the CEO, Inaba-san, what the CEO of Fanuc decided was at the time that they would put all their effort into helping these companies by writing a new software that will allow the robots to recalibrate themselves. Let's make the robots smarter. Right. And a huge group effort went into this. And then the company donated the software to the affected companies in Tohoku. And so that's basically recalibration as a service, right? Or, sort of, and then so I asked, well, what do you do with this product? No, yeah, this is great. Yeah. So now we have the software. We can actually sell it as a subscription model, right? So you buy a robot and then you just buy the services that will keep the robot running. And that's actually part of the competitive strength. So it does already exist. And more companies are getting into this. It's apparently they figure that it's more lucrative to have, hundreds of thousands of users that pay a small monthly fee than to sell these services. And that's the math they did, and they figured out that that's better. And as that becomes more common and customers get more used to the fact that they don't own, like we had to get used to the fact that we didn't own the music, right? And now we've gotten used to it, and so it's easy. But customers have to get used to this also. So it'll take a while for this to roll out. But yeah, so there are already examples of successful business modeling around that.
What's your view on the number of Fortune 500 companies in Japan? It went from 100-ish to 50-ish. Do you think the number will reduce further? And is that a good thing or a bad thing in your view?
So the Fortune 500 list measures size of company by sales, right?
Yeah.
I've never thought that that's a particularly meaningful measure of the quality of a company. I think that is choose and focus, Sentaku Tashuchu, and it's a good thing. That and who cares whether you're number 50 or number 150 in the world's largest companies. So I think that is much more important than whether that company is a part of that the Fortune 500 is a sort of an old era.
Yeah, I think well put, because I think market cap is fine and sales is fine, but people forget that at the end of the day, the real metric is the profit. I think, that metric probably has to be revisited as well. I mean,
profit, or is it profitability, or is it innovativeness, or is it future? So thank you for organizing the IGPI Chi no Kyouso. It's a great opportunity to exchange ideas and learn from each other around the globe. I learned a lot from this opportunity, and I hope that my remarks were helpful for the audience. I would also like to congratulate IGPI on its 15th anniversary, and I expect a growing role of IGPI as Japan tackles the digital transformation. Good luck.